Hello and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Dr. Donald Pelto, and today I have Mr. Paul Hobrough, and he is a physiotherapist from the UK. And we're going to be talking today about something called shockwave or radial shockwave therapy. Welcome, Paul.
Very, very glad to be here. Thank you, Donald, for inviting me.
You are welcome. So, Paul, tell me a little bit about yourself as a physical therapist, as a person, and your interest in shockwave.
So, okay, so I have to be a little bit more American here rather than the typical English holding everything back. So, I was a full-time athlete. I used to race kayaks. I spent 16 years in the British kayak team, traveled all over the world, had a wonderful life as a full-time athlete. And I needed fixing, so I was seeing people like physiotherapists, osteopaths, podiatrists, and I just thought they were the most wonderful species on the planet. They were literally changing my life, and I really wanted to try and emulate some of these people that I'd been seeing. And so I set about, whilst I was still kayaking, studying, and because my dad's a professor, my mum got an OBE for education, I was just going all around the world in a canoe. So I ended up doing 3 different degrees over the course of that time, simply because I had time on my hands in between training sessions. And then the minute that I retired from sport, I set up a practice, and it was almost an overnight success. It was fantastic. And I just took all of the goal setting from being an athlete and put it into business. So my first foray into business was just lifting what I was as an athlete and saying, right, if I want to be here in 5 years, what have I got to do tomorrow and next week and next month? And so I built this business, and at one point I had 7 practices all over London and the south of England. And then we had a bit of a recession here, and I started selling practices, and I started developing that business mindset of building something and selling it. And that's kind of what I've done throughout. I teach for a company called Storks Medical that produced the focus shockwave and radial pressure wave. I teach for a company called DJO, which people are most familiar with, the Don Joy braces you use when you go skiing or playing sport. So I teach for them, and that's pretty much put me all over the world, which has been great. My practice is still going now. It's been going for nearly 20 years. And I'm the bestseller of 2 books, Running Free of Injuries and The Runner's Expert Guide to Stretching. And I'm the Virgin Money London Marathon official physio, and a bunch of other stuff. But essentially, I've sucked the juice out of everything that my career has to offer. I've set myself goals, and I'm very, very thankful that I've managed to achieve those. And shockwave therapy was the biggest game changer in my practice, in my professional career, in my teaching career. And that happened a long time ago now. And I just couldn't believe how much better my patients were, and the shorter amount of time it took to get them there. So not only were they having a stronger, fuller fix to their problem, we were getting there faster. And as a business operation, that's fantastic, because word of mouth then spreads like a forest fire. And my business was going up and up and up. And it got to the point where I had a business model, which I thought, this is pretty good. And I started teaching it to other people, and they would go, my God, this is game changing. And so I'm morphing now into about a 1/3 split of working with patients, a 1/3 split of teaching professionals, and a 1/3 split of my time mentoring clinic owners and developing their clinic. We look to double revenue and beyond, and we've got some well thought out, well tried and tested, but ultimately fairly simple things that we implement for people. And I'm actually very proud of all of it. And if I was in the UK, I'd be being all bashful and quiet about this. But whenever I teach in the States, people teach you to kind of fly your own flag a little bit. So it feels a bit odd for me doing it, but I'm happy to share the story.
Well, we're going to focus more on your work with shockwave itself. If we could focus more on the lower extremity from the hip and knee down. How has it been a game changer? Let's talk about a couple of common conditions that some of the viewers might think of, maybe Achilles tendonitis and plantar fasciitis. Can you talk about your treatments before and post shockwave?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, Achilles and plantar fasciitis are the kind of the poster injuries of shockwave. They're the ones that have got, you know, it's where we started, it's got the most science. I think they were using it on plantar fasciitis back in 2020, so, you know, 20 years of radial shockwave on plantar fasciitis with no negative effects. So going back to before shockwave, one of the first patients that came into me and said, I've got plantar fasciitis, in the UK at least, we used to say, oh, it's a self-limiting condition, you know, 18 months to 3 years, this will wear itself out. And the guy looked at me and said, I'm a runner. Like, how can I accept that? I've got to do something. And I said, okay, well, let's bring it all together. And I came up with an 8-step plan for people. And it was no barefoot walking. It was writing the alphabet with your feet when you first woke up. You stretch your gastrocnemius and your soleus, the 2 key muscles in your calf. You'd wear a Strasbourg sock at night, which pulls the big toe into extension, stretches it. You may be using little ice sometimes when it's very, very sore. And we put an orthotic insole in. And we were giving that plan to everybody from this first guy, and it seemed to be having some decent success. But then I literally, because of the forums in the UK, I had people coming in on crutches, then wheelchairs going, I hear you fix this. And I was going, whoa, okay. And we'd find that it can be a really stubborn condition. And, you know, I was working really, really hard. And it got to a point where 80% of my workload was plantar fasciitis, simply because I'd had a few successes. Combine that to when we started using shockwave, and people were literally getting off the couch. They weren't waiting 10, 12, 16 weeks. They were literally getting off the couch after that first treatment, and they wanted to tap dance. They were kind of going, this is incredible. And I'd say to them, what you've had is what we call hyperstimulation anesthesia. It's 2 hours to 2 days worth of pain reduction. If you do too much on that foot now, you're going to come back and you're going to hate me in a week's time. So just go with what you're doing. Follow my now 9-point plan, because shockwave is involved. And we were finding that we had people in 6 weeks getting back to running and doing all the things they wanted to do. And so again, you then get this swarm of people with plantar fasciitis coming in going, I hear you've got this magic thing. And you kind of going, right, hold on, it works really, really well. It's got an 82% success rate. What fits you in that 18%? I don't know, but we're going to work. Everyone just kept getting better. I wasn't having any misses. Everyone was getting better. And I was just like, this is crazy good. Then you go to the Achilles tendinopathy, as you said. And so this is really prevalent in runners, but it doesn't mean that runners just have to suffer from it. And we used to say, look, if you can run with a 3 or 4 out of 10 pain level, we're happy with that. You've got to do your, at the time it was just eccentric loading. So you're standing on a step and you lower your heel down slowly. Then you come up with the good foot and lower down. And you have to do those every other day. And we would start to get people back into running. But the Achilles, if you look at someone that's had a long-term Achilles, they've got this kind of cartoon bump. So the Achilles should be a nice straight line. It's like on a knuckle in the middle of it. And I used to tell people, look, just the pain's going to go away eventually, the function's going to come back, but that bump's going to stay. So you just stop, you know, thinking that the bump is a problem. But they couldn't get over that. We started using radial shockwave. So I've got the hand pieces here. So radial shockwave is this one, EPAT, you call it over there. And we were getting some good results and people felt great. When I started using the focus shockwave, we call this more like a laser, that callus, that bump started disappearing. It literally in front of our eyes over 3 or 4 weeks. And for the patient who is looking at something visual and saying, but my Achilles still has a bump, I'm still worried about that. That was meteoric. And that's when I started realizing that this is a regenerative therapy. It's actually restoring those previously, as we thought, like almost dead fibers that we're like, let's deal with the healthy tissue. Let's just leave that to one side. I used to liken the Achilles to a bit like heart tissue after a heart attack. You still got the Achilles working, but that gubbins around it, that stuff around it, that's just always going to be there. We started doing this regenerative stuff with focus shockwave, and they were slimming down. to the point where after 3 or 4 sessions, honestly, I couldn't tell which was the injured one. And I was like, this is incredible. So again, then you start to see loads of people with Achilles problems because they're showing their friends, going, look, remember that bump I had? It's not there anymore. So I would say that shockwave has been like a massive catapult in terms of my ability as a clinician and the amount of referrals I get as a consequence of that, because people are so moved by what they've been able to achieve that where did you get that? You know, and so we have no shortage of patients. So probably more of a problem of shortage of good clinicians to come in and help me. But the change was the biggest thing that has happened to my career, bar none.
Wow. Now, for those that are watching the program, maybe they struggle with Achilles or plantar fasciitis. How long does the treatment take? And then what is your typical treatment protocol? How many visits? Do they come in? When do they follow up and things like that? Is it different for each diagnosis, or is it specific just for the treatment?
It can be different depending upon the size of the patient, how long they've had the problem for. But in the main, let's go with what I'd say 95% of my people go through, which is a 6-week block of treatment. So they come in once a week. It can be 5 days apart, it can be 10 days apart, but ideally it's once a week, fits into my diary more than anything. It's not necessarily a scientific thing. And when they come in, we do a fair bit of manual therapy. So we do soft tissue work. There's this little adaptation called the V-Actor. It's like a vibration device. I use that all over the
Shockwave.
So that's before. So shockwave in its early days got this kind of reputation of being quite a painful treatment. And what's happening, people were applying too high a pressure too early. So what we do is a system where I massage the calf muscle first. And I find these little trigger points where you think of muscle fibers contracting and relaxing. And each fiber makes up a big long muscle fiber. So you've got lots of these units within the fiber. So by massaging, you know, I think my hands and thumbs have well surpassed the 10,000 hours rule of being able to find stuff. And then we loosen off the tissue with this vibration. That starts stimulating a pain relieving chemical change and neurological change within the body. So you become a bit more numb to the tissue. Then I would use this one, the EPAT as you call it, the radio pressure wave, and I'd go back in search of those trigger points. I'd use all over the calf muscle. I'd be spending more time on each trigger point, breaking them up, changing the chemical and the neurological reaction there so that these muscle knots just relax. And then we come on to the Achilles tendon itself, and we're doing about 2,000 shocks up and down the Achilles, or if you're on the plantar, over that painful spot on the plantar, up and down the plantar, slow movement. And then I'd come in with the focus device, and I go straight on that most painful spot of the Achilles, or straight on that most painful spot on the plantar fascia, and we do 1,500 to 2,000 shocks there. So in the total treatment time, I allow about 30, 40 minutes. So it's a really, really comprehensive thing. And then they leave knowing what their loading program is. So they're going to do calf raises, the rest of this plan that we've talked about. So they get homework to do. They do that typically every other day, come back in the next week, and we redo the process. I like to think of shockwave. If you've got the old hula hoop, where, you know, back in the old days, and you hit it with a stick down the road, you get to a point where it didn't matter whether you hit the hoop anymore, it had reached its maximum velocity. It wasn't going to go any faster. And the tissues in the body, I believe, need 10 hits with the shockwave, and then you've got 3 months where the wheel's turning and actually approaching it anymore. So as I say to people, you've got to come for 6 weeks, but then you've got 90 days of treatment that's taking place within your body. We've kick-started, we've excited stem cells. We're literally creating new soft tissue, new bone cells in that area. And your body now needs 90 days to get those all in place and maximize their potency and their ability. So we've got a stronger unit at the end of it. So for those 90 days, I don't really need to see the person. Their body's doing everything possible. It's literally working at its maximum potential. And then we do a follow-up after those 90 days. But what I love about shockwave is it gives them that 6-week window where they've got to come once a week, and that also gives them a budget. So this is what it's going to cost. It's not going to be come back next week, come back next week, come back next week. It sounds like a lot of money, but when you see the results, honestly, I always say to people, if it works, it's always cheap.
And talk a little bit more. You started talking about the science, maybe not the full science of it, but can you just explain maybe in your 1 or 2 minute explanation that you give to explain how it works? How does shockwave work?
Okay, I'm a simple fella, so I like things in layman's terms. So you've got a physical shock that hits the skin. So it's actually, I don't like the term non-invasive, it's non-surgical. And what happens is that shockwave then propagates to the correct depth of where the tissue is. And that increases blood flow. So we call that microscopic circulation down the tissues. What does blood bring? It brings us calcium, it brings us oxygen, it brings us everything you need for healing. So straight away, we're improving the healing rate significantly. If you're using the focus shockwave, we're not sure at the moment with the radial, you are stimulating the stem cell activities. So stem cells are the God cell, they call it. It literally rebirths life, and the stem cell can become anything it wants, bone, soft tissue, whatever. So when you stimulate that in the right area, you are then propagating more cells. And this thing called mechanotransduction, which is basically the fruit of all tissue regeneration. You can get some mechanotransduction by doing exercises, but shockwave again gives it to you in spades. So we're looking at influencing the soft tissue to rebuild itself faster than it even beforehand knew how to. We're looking at stimulating the blood flow system, which brings all the nutrients. And we're actually having an effect on the peripheral nerve system, which helps to reduce pain, but it also helps to normalize some of so just to delve off into pain science a little bit, when you're suffering with pain for a long time, the area of your brain that is responsible for accepting that pain message actually grows bigger. So for a smaller kind of stimulus on that area that's painful, you can get a bigger message of pain because there's more receptors there. So shockwave is believed to improve that and actually reduce and normalize and reset that centralized pain perception, so you get a normal response to pain. You'll have seen lots of people got an Achilles problem and they keep squeezing it and the pain is immeasurable. After a course of shockwave, they won't have that response. Everything will be reduced down. So it works on several levels, all of which are vital to give you the whole.
Yeah. Now, Paul, we talked about two, it's kind of a tendon or the fascia injuries. Let's talk about some of the other things that can happen in the lower extremity. I'll throw out a couple of diagnoses and you tell me your experience. Peripheral neuropathy, arthritis, and bone spurs, or any other type of things that you've had any good success with.
Yeah, so osteoarthritis is like my little baby with shockwave. I'm my first patient, and I went to see a fantastic orthopedic consultant here in the UK who said to me, age 40, Paul, you've got a knee of an 85-year-old. It's riddled with arthritis. You've got 2 stress fractures. You've got 3 cysts in there. And if you go for a run, as I was saying, I still want to run, he said, you're going to potentially burst the cysts, you're going to open up the cracks, and I'm going to be operating on you in 6 weeks to 6 months, and you're going to have a new knee. And I was like, wow, okay, so this is bad. I hadn't read anything at that point about shockwave being any good for osteoarthritis of the knee, but I had nothing to lose. And I knew it didn't do any harm. So I started using the radial shockwave on my knee, and I was like, this is great. I mean, my knee doesn't hurt. I was awake 2 nights a week with what you call an osteoarthritic flare. My knee was throbbing, it was hot, I struggled to walk on it, it felt unstable. I started using the radial shockwave, and within 6 weeks, I would say that I was 70% better in terms of how my knee felt. It was still not quite there, but you know, I was able to exercise it. I'd go cycling again. I didn't have any flares at night. Then when I started using the focus shockwave, I mean, I started running again. I mean, I'm literally, forget surgery. And I took the MRI that I got when I was 40, and I took another one 5 years later after I'd been using shockwave every 6 months. and the change was incredible. I'd actually rejuvenated the bone in my knee. It was starting to look like it was going backwards. I was getting a younger knee. Yeah, not perfect. I was still going to have surgery at some point, but given that I'm 48 now, I should have had surgery. He told me maximum 6 years. And I've been exercising really, really heavily on it today and the day before. I can run. I've been chasing rounders around with the kids in the field and all sorts of stuff. And I was so happy I started using it on patients who said, I'm going for surgery, and they stopped going for surgery. So the protocol that I use for arthritis is we do radial pressure wave all up and down the quads, hamstrings, adductors, abductors, everything that surrounds the knee. And I do focus because you need focused shockwave to have an effect on bone. And also radial can be very, very tender over bone, whereas focus is a little bit easier, and you can get the depths. So I might be doing, let's say, 3,000 to 4,000 shots of focus shockwave actually on the knee joint, and I might be doing another 2,500 on the muscles that surround it. So again, a really comprehensive session. And I've had incredible success. And I've got patients that have got on record saying that, you know, they are 70% better. And these are people in their 60s, 70s, 80s who couldn't walk upstairs like perhaps the rest of us do. They were going up one at a time. It was taking forever. And he came to me and said, you know what, I've forgotten. I ran up the stairs the other day. No pain, no problem. So it's changing people's lives. You've got to factor in with osteoarthritis that, I say this in layman's terms, but the end of the thigh bone in normal circumstance will remodel itself with completely new bone cell over a 6-month period. Over a 1-year period, your body is completely different to the one you had a year ago because you're constantly laying down new cells and getting rid of the old overly mature ones. In osteoarthritis, you can't stop that process. So I went with the decision that every 6 months we would redo the therapy, and that's what my patients do. They come back every 6 months for the osteoarthritis. So the risk of me rambling on too much, I'm passionate about the subject, but you mentioned about peripheral neuropathies. So Morton's neuroma, which is a common one between the second and third or third and fourth toes in the foot, feels like you've got stone inside your shoe and you can get numbness in your toes. The typical surgery was to go from underneath the foot and actually cut that excess nerve away. I think of it like a very, very thin, hair-like nerve structure, and it gets like a candy floss build-up over it, which then gets caught in between the bony knuckles of the toes. And we started years and years ago, people would surgically remove that from the underside of the foot, and the surgery itself would create more scarring, and generally speaking, people would get it again. Then they started going in through the top of the foot, through the dorsum, but you split a key piece of connective tissue, so the feet would splay, and some would say, well, that's maybe why it's having such a good effect. With shockwave, we're not cutting anything. We are literally taking away that candy floss by using shockwave. And most of the studies reflect that people's pain would drop from an 8 out of 10 to a 2 out of 10, and within that 3 months, it would be completely gone. And so I don't treat lots and lots of Morton's neuroma. You know, it's more the scope of a podiatrist. But I've never missed with a Morton's neuroma. And likewise, if you think of carpal tunnel syndrome, where all these fingers go numb, tends not to be the little one. And you get this kind of lack of grip and this pain in your wrist. Again, carpal tunnel, they'd inject steroid in there, which can be pretty good actually. Injection therapy gets a bit of a bum rap because it's brilliant for the first 6 to 8 weeks, but it tends not to have too many long-term outcomes. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's fantastic for a short-term pain relief. But when you put shockwave on this carpal tunnel, phenomenal results. And I would say 6 sessions directly on the carpal tunnel itself. You're literally trying to hit the median nerve. And nerves used to be seen as a bit of a contraindication for shockwave. Now it's an actual indication. And we sort of learned that through trying out on these peripheral nerve things, just how good the equipment is on nerves. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like it's a panacea cure-it-all for everything, but it's a panacea cure-all for everything. No, it is really, really good. There's so much you can do with it.
I can see you've had great success with it, and I know in Europe you're about probably 10 or 15 years in front of us, basically because I don't know if it, I don't know why. Is it covered by insurance in other countries, or I know it's not here, and maybe that's part of the reason, or just the technology? As we conclude, any thoughts on that?
So yeah, we are covered by insurance companies, and I personally have kind of led that charge. They used to say only consultants could use it, and so I got on the phone to all the insurance companies, and I said, "Who do you think's training those consultants?" And they said, "I don't know." So it's me. So I'm training them, and you're saying that they can use it, but you're not going to let the educator use it. And that kind of opened the door. I was the only one able to use it for a while, and then we campaigned, and I said, well, what if I'm training other practitioners? Then surely they should be able to use it. So we opened the door that way. It originated in Germany, my gosh, in 1980, roughly. And it was an extrapolation of lithotripsy, which you use to break up kidney stones. And it's grown and grown and grown. And it's since 1999, we've had the radial pressure wave. And that's really opened the doors to lots of allied healthcare professionals using it. And for me, the growth in the UK is something that I feel very proud of. I think I've had a big part in that because I was one of the early adopters. And I've educated a huge percentage of the people that are using it. And now traveling all over the world, you realise that we've actually, from coming from behind from Germany somewhat, we're now seen as one of the highly developed places of shockwave. And last year I got asked to go up to Beijing to the International Society of Medical Shockwave Treatments, which is the international governing body. And as far as I'm aware, I was the first person from the UK ever invited to go there, and possibly the first physiotherapist, full stop, to go there. And I passed all their exams, so I got internationally accredited. And that was a real thing for me, that actually taking the UK and putting it on the map. And a lot of the stuff I do online is what's delivering that, because the big names, as you like, the people in the business have been in it for a long time, just started to notice the things that I was doing, and that's what's helped. And traveling to Central America now, which I'm doing more and more, I feel like we're spreading the word even more. So and loads of stuff in Australia and across Europe. So I'm invited out to Australia in August if we can still travel there. So I'm really excited about the future of it worldwide.
I can see that. So Paul, as we conclude here, if people want to learn more about you and learn more about Shockwave, if they're not in my community and if they're not in your community, if they want to learn about Shockwave and about you, how can they learn more?
So my business I have Physiotherapy UK, which is my bricks and mortar physio business, and I have paulhobrough.com. So Hobrough is an interesting name. Very few people own it, so we're quite proud of it, and we've got a very slim family tree. But it's Hobrough, so Paul Hobrough. And you could even just go on Amazon and put running free of injuries in, and my name will come up if you're struggling with spelling. And paulhobrough.com, I post a ton of educational content on there. And that's also, so paulhobrough.com/mentoring is where I do my mentoring of the clinic. So I've got people in the States, people in Australia, around Europe and in the UK. And we do that one-on-one, and it's a monthly call just like this on Zoom. And we get so much done in that hour that there's homework to be done before the next time we meet a month later. And it's a great system. So I welcome anyone to go to paulhobrough.com or Physiotherapy UK, reach out, ask me any questions. I come from a world where I think there's a lot of stuff for everyone. So I don't mind sharing. There are people, certainly in the UK, which are like, this is mine and I'm holding on to it. I'm not going to let you have this information. I much prefer to be over here and just share whatever I've got. Obviously, I'm a businessman, so there are certain bits you've got to pay for, but I'll work with anyone that has the same mindset and really wants to develop themselves. And people that aren't like that, then sometimes just say, I'm not interested, because I've got to feel it,
Hey guys, thank you for watching Healthy Living. You're going to find a few links here I'd like you to click. One is to subscribe to this channel on YouTube. Also, you can learn more. There are some videos here you can see.